Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of VertoTalks On-Air. I'm Nicole. I'm part of the growth team at VertoDigital. If you've watched any of our previous sessions, you might have seen me moderating, helping with the flow, the Q&A, technical side of the live stream, basically. While we're waiting for people to join, I'll just do a quick intro and some housekeeping notes about the session. Um, For any of you guys that might not know VertoDigital and what we do, we're a digital marketing agency specializing in helping B2B companies grow their marketing generated pipeline through services like data analytics, paid media, SEO, and VertoTalks on Air are our online format of sessions where we dive into interesting topics from the marketing field, sharing some real frameworks from our own work, practical insights, real case studies, all of that. Um, Something you hear us talk about at Vertu is pipeline, and that's exactly why today's topic is so important. We're talking about moving from lead-based to pipeline-based optimization for Google and LinkedIn campaigns using first-party data and server-side measurement. To walk us through this session, basically. I'm joined here on screen by Yasin and Dan. Um, Yasin is partner and head of our data analytics team at VertoDigital, and Dan is a product manager at Stape, basically a data tracking and measurement expert. Before I hand it over to them. Uh, just a quick note: the session is going to be around 60 minutes long, but of course, if we go through everything faster, that's also okay. We're live on LinkedIn, so please share your questions and thoughts in the comment section that you see on the right hand side as we go. I'll make sure to collect all questions and we'll answer as many as we can after the presentation part of the session. So with that, I'll hand it over to you guys. Maybe Yasin can start first. Hi, Yasin. Hi, Dan, by the way.
Thanks for the intro, Nikki, and thanks for kicking us off. I think you've outlined what we're going to talk today and how things going to go, so I'm going to just jump straight into it and quickly talk about us for a second. You did mention what we do and what we specialize for, but ultimately, pipeline-driven is what we are striving to have all of our clients to be and help them with their B2B efforts. We are generally doing that through the three services, data analytics, which is the one that I'm heading, where myself and the team are focusing a lot on building the technical foundations so that the advertising and SEO teams have the data and the integrations needed in order to do their work in a better and more efficient and reportable and measurable way. Advertising, however, is quite core of our offering as an agency, and this is going to be, I guess, the main topic that we're going to touch base on today in terms of how we use Google and LinkedIn to run campaigns and how do we leverage our clients' pipeline-related data and obviously execute their digital programs and make sure that performance is through and through. And of course, SEO is another part, but we'll touch less on it for today's session. Over the years, we have worked with quite a few companies. We've been focusing on quite a few areas, but privacy, safe measurement, and touching on things such as consent, conversion API, server-side tracking is quite key, offline conversion loops, and generally using LinkedIn and value-based bidding and other kind of advanced technologies and functionalities within Google Ads to run pipeline quality and pipeline signals. We've been doing for quite a while now. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see some of the results that we've been seeing with some of our clients. And generally, this is a quick reference to show that what we're talking about here and the importance of a pipeline signals over to the advertising platforms is something that actually brings results. But the way we ultimately package it all up and the way we position ourselves and our success formula, if we can put it that way, is ultimately the way that we deliver our services. First of all, them being integrated and the solutions that we provide being kind of core part of one single unit, which is delivered by a specialist team within the different services that I mentioned earlier. We have specialists which are focusing on their own specialty and deep diving into topics that are relevant to their service area. But last and definitely not least, the core component of our success formula is our strategic partnerships, the type of companies and partners that we want to collaborate with so that we can extend our capabilities and provide better quality service to our clients by leveraging either the tooling or the expertise that our partners bring, which is ultimately why we have Dan and Stape visiting us and joining us on this webinar to kind of show you how pipeline-driven optimization is ultimately enabled by some of the technology that Stape provides. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to Dan to give you a quick intro about Stape.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Yasin, for the introduction, and thanks for having me today. Like the guy said already, my name is Dan. I'm a product manager at Stape. And what we are and the purpose of this partnership in principle is we are a provider for server-side tracking, which is part of the conversation that we're going to have today. So I'm going to flex some numbers at you. We are almost 5 years old. I think the birthday is this June, so stay tuned. Perhaps presents, I don't know. We currently serve roughly 200,000 customers. There's 750, maybe more, agency partners, Verto here being one of the cherished partners, of course. And we currently employ up to, I think it's 106 or so employees. Now, we are also one of the, I would say, the most certified server-side provider out there on the market. You can see some of the certifications listed out here. Some of them are fairly standard, let's say, and popular. You, of course, got your GDPR, like CCPA for California, but there's also some obscure things like HIPAA compliance, so we can sign your BAAs. There's also DORA for those of you in banking or infrastructure, might be fairly important. We serve roughly 15 billion requests daily, which is a flex on the infrastructure and the fact that we can scale pretty much endlessly with you. So you should not be ever concerned about infra if you are with Stape through Verto or otherwise. And the last slide here is just to tell you that we consider ourselves to be a one-stop shop. That is, we democratize and remove barriers into entry into server-side tracking by providing you with managed infrastructure, by abstracting a lot of common cases into actual like click solutions, and ton of other stuff. Like we do this knowledge sharing, which this webinar is an example of. We provide you with 24/7 support, of course, humans, no AI, and all the other goodness. At this point, I want to give the word back to Yasin, and I'll be speaking to you guys in like 20-ish minutes. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan. And ultimately, that last slide is a few of the reasons why we initially reached out and kind of formalized the partnership, and why we, as an agency, really benefit from what's already there, so that we don't have to be investing time and effort into maintenance, into developing things customly, just so that we can provide the pipes between the platforms that we're going to talk through. But let's dive into the pipeline-driven optimization that is the core topic of today. I'll throw you one stat. It's 50%. And according to a recent study, this is the percentage of B2B marketers that still optimize for leads. Now, this is quite of a generalized kind of statistic, but through what we see from our clients and kind of the new kind of engagements that we get to, this is unfortunately often the case. It's 2026. It probably sounds too ridiculous in a sense, but a lot of businesses are still focusing and throwing a lot of advertising effort and money towards signals that are too vague and too upper funnel for any type of advertising platform's algorithm to pick up and ultimately make sense of. And that's essentially the result of it. Platforms learn from the signals that we send, whether it is Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever. If we are passing leads and showing the algorithms on the advertising side that this is ultimately what we want to be paying more for, this is what we're going to get more of. And today we want to give you an example of how we change that and how we move away from vanity over to something more specific. And what you're going to walk away with today is ultimately those three things: our conversion framework and how we map CRM lifecycle stages to what Google and LinkedIn care about when it comes to conversion signals; a measurement playbook, which is why first-party data and server-side measurement is the foundation for that reliable optimization, and what are the core things that are being solved from Stape's point of view as well, because their technology is definitely an enabler for us. And last but not least, a couple of KPIs and things that we measure and track in order to get more value of infrastructure setups that we do, so that we not only activate but also measure and report from the data. I'll walk you quickly through a lifecycle conversion framework. Nothing new in the world of B2B and into a general kind of CRM type of a setup, but there is a ladder. Every stage is a potential conversion signal, and it's a potential for giving more value back to the advertising platforms so that you can extract more out of it as well. As we know, all of those type of journeys starts with a lead. You pay for some ads, you run some ads on some platforms, they bring traffic to your website. At some point, those potential customers express interest through scrolling through pages, checking content, and at some point they express interest through filling a form for either something to educate themselves on or express interest in the product, request a demo, etc. Generally, this is higher volume, but as you would see in a bit, there is definitely the low qualification that we can apply there in order to understand whether that's actually a lead of a quality. At the stage after that, we now enter more into the standard outside of the website type flow, where we have now the MQL stage, when some firmographic and behavioral data meets some marketing qualified understanding, and then there is a filter. A lot of those leads might not even qualify for what we've defined them as of quality, and they would be dropped. After that, we move over to sales qualified or sales accepted leads. It's essentially now starting a real conversation. This is when the process involves other people. Now it's ultimately outside of marketing's hands. They've brought the leads, the MQLs, but now it's sales to kind of close the deal. Once they've done, the part of the job is now to push it over to opportunity, which is the active deal in the pipeline. And that is ultimately, I would even say, the gold standard. As long as there is enough volume of it, it's the gold standard to be able to see things that are brought in by marketing are actually opportunities that might turn into ultimately won deals, which is close revenue. Unfortunately, depending on different scenarios and different companies, often it is too rare and too low for any algorithm to essentially be using it as a useful point of reference for anything but attribution. Attribution-wise, there is definitely the link of what kind of campaign activity and touch points brought that deal, but in terms of optimization, often it's not too high enough in order for any algorithm to pick it up. But having this kind of life cycle ladder and users going through it, there are a few quite big challenges that come into play, which I would like to share with you. The first one is on the lead stage. As I mentioned earlier and explained how users flow to the website, this is something that usually occurs on the actual website, online, in the browser, which is on one hand easier because we have quicker access to set things up so that we can start passing signals to the advertising platforms. But on the other hand, there are a few challenges that they're simply too kind of big to avoid, hence the red boxes. But to start with, around 42% of online users are using ad blockers. This is almost half of the traffic coming to your website, might be even traffic that is not even visible and trackable. Depending on, yet again, the industry, the product, and the scenario, if the users that are browsing your website are using Safari, for example, ITP ultimately kills cookies and attribution after the 7th day, meaning that the first-party cookies set for the users that you're using to identify them and measure and track them are being deprecated after 7 days, which presents different type of challenges, especially when it comes to measurement and attribution. But yet again, last but not least, what we've also seen across our client portfolio is that a big chunk of the leads that are being captured on the website are unqualified. And by unqualified, it means that before we're even able to understand their job title, their industry, more information about them, and be able to filter them to an MQL type of a logic, um, on the client side, on the browser, while they're filling up the form, usually we lack that information, which results in feeding a lot of unrelevant or rather irrelevant information back to the advertising platforms of leads, which are not the ICP, not something that we want to be having more of. And this is probably the biggest problem when it comes to quality. But then when we move down the funnel, we get to the challenge number 2. Once someone fills the form, they enter the CRM kind of world, and the steps that are followed after that, they all occur offline. They're all in the CRM and are async from whatever the user is doing on the website, whether they're coming back, reading more. That process is currently going kind of side by side. And if I can illustrate it kind of in a very simple way, let's imagine that this person came on the website online, saw a page. After that page, they decided to fill a form. Filling that form then put them in the CRM. Now they are being qualified whether they meet the marketing qualified criteria or not. Then perhaps they might be pushed to sales qualified because a salesperson starts talking to them because of their qualification. In the meantime, they probably have visited the website another time through a different channel perhaps. Then they move down the funnel into opportunity, and then at some point they go to a closed deal. It's quite disconnected on one hand, and on the other hand, all of those signals in the gray area below are currently just sitting in the CRM. The Google ecosystem or the LinkedIn ecosystem, they have no clue about the ads that are bringing the traffic to the website, actually bringing those kind of activities down in the CRM in the offline area. And ultimately, what we want to do by implementing the technologies that we're going to reference in a bit later is to be able to connect those kind of dots, and not only connect them for attribution's sake and understanding a particular user's journey, but also being able to capture all of those signals and pass them along for the advertising algorithms to optimize for. And this is the signals that you should ensure that algorithms receive. This is activity happening outside the website, but we should be passing MQLs, SQLs, opportunities, and closed ones if we can and if we have the volume. And this is another kind of quick proof of what are the results when this is the case. And I've left a little link there for a full case study that you can check later once Nicole shares the slides. But with one of our clients last year, Cloudflare, just for the implementation's sake of passing those signals and switching the conversion strategies and optimization strategies rather to use conversions from the CRM, this resulted in open opportunities rate to jump by 49%. And that was just within the 90-day period of actually switching the optimization strategy. And just quickly shows to prove that the more quality you give to the advertising algorithms, the more quality you get back through the campaigns that are bringing quality traffic. And then I guess the third challenge is, obviously I've been talking about Google, LinkedIn, and obviously there are differences, different channels, different approaches. And if we have to be specific when it comes to Google Ads and LinkedIn, obviously on the one hand, for Google Ads, we have some high intent users. They are actively searching for a problem and a solution, and the ads that you can display to those kind of users are definitely more high intent. On the other hand, with LinkedIn, it's lower intent. It's more an approach where you need to fine-tune the audience and the targeting of your ICP and the users that you want to be chasing, opposed to relying on some intent that's shown through the platform that you can capture, which ultimately leads to a few different approaches that we would take. For example, in Google, if we want to take a primary conversion as a quick example, SQL opportunity with enough volumes to satisfy the algorithms, which from memory, I believe are at least 30 conversions per 30 days and more, is the best type of quality signal that we can use to align the conversion to a deeper CRM stages. On the LinkedIn side, however, even though there is no terminology-wise primary conversion kind of a setup, the main thing that we can show strong qualification signals that would then be outweighing kind of the broad reach, because we are kind of shooting into an audience without necessarily intent, is slightly lower up or down the funnel, like MQL or SQL. MQL usually, this is kind of the threshold minimum that is being met. And then a secondary, it's yet again kind of shifting across the funnel up and down, but for secondary on Google Ads, MQL or leads, but leads that are to some extent validated and filtered through on the client side through, for example, some ABM or firmographic information that you can capture, so that you can keep the algorithms fed while you're optimizing for quality on the primary angle. And same on LinkedIn, even leads with some thoughtful setup and circumvention of some of the blocking things that might be preventing volume is something that benefits the platform and the campaigns that you're running on it. And generally, obviously, the two have slightly different goals. Obviously, the general goal is to bring more qualified leads. But if we look narrowly into the channel, when it comes to Google Ads, it's to capture the demand efficiently and mainly and importantly attributed to pipeline. Otherwise, we have no way to validate and kind of change our strategies. And on the LinkedIn side, build pipeline to, speak to buying committees and not just to job titles, and have a strategy that kind of covers a broad approach to a few people that are making a decision when it comes to buying software, for example, for a B2B setup. So all of those challenges, obviously, they kind of merge together to require some technology behind it. And we'll talk about that in a second once Dan joins in. But having that technology in place and having all of those CRM stages mapped out and flowing from the CRM and the website to the advertising platforms, on the other hand, allows us and the team on my side, for example, or the advertising team that is doing the optimization, to move from measuring vanity metrics to start measuring actual value and be able to answer questions like what actually a qualified lead looks like. Apart from the ICP definition, what are the buying signals? What are the characteristics of those folks? What are the types of pages that they do, that they see, where they're coming from, and additional points of data that we can use to further kind of fine-tune the ICP. Additionally, start to better understand the value of each conversion type. Obviously, there are different things that can happen on the website, such as a demo request, a white paper download, and then different other things that are signals that we can start having a better understanding of what's their weight and value to push forward down the funnel to opportunity and to a closed won deal. And then how do we actually attribute the revenue of the marketing efforts based on the different capabilities that we have, whether that's within the CRM, whether that's through a analytics platform such as GA, generally give us more to understand more. And then having all those signals and data flowing, we can move away from simply looking at impressions, sessions, clicks, page views, etc., over to some more advanced and kind of fruitful metrics, such as, for example, MQL and opportunity quality. We can simply calculate that by lead to opportunity rate and the drop downs from that, and then narrow down on that rate and understand how to improve it. What is the qualified pipeline? Like, how many marketing source opportunities are coming and how can we increase them? And last but not least, the revenue. Direct marketing contributing to close deals. And without actual measurement and pipes to flow the data back and forth, there is no way to actually understand the volumes of that. And lastly, depending on the scenario, there is always the customer lifetime value and how long-term account value stays. This is quite custom per business, and to be honest, too generic to kind of deep dive to talk about it now, but something that is also an option once you have the pipes connected. And lastly, another kind of quick proof point of a similar kind of approach that we took with one of our other clients, where we simply moved from lead volume to MQL quality as what we've been after and the things that required and allowed that. And simply that allowed us to do a 90% increase in MQLs and 227 in marketing source pipeline, simply because we can first measure it and also enable it by having the pipes connected. And this is another quick proof of obviously connecting all of those dots and having the technology behind it to do it without even you have to think about it is kind of key. So with that being said, I'll pass it over to Dan to give you a bit of an overview of some of the challenges and how Stape solves them, and ultimately how that infrastructure layer kind of fits into the whole pipeline connection strategy story.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Yasin. Right. So, yeah, going to tell you high level about what server-side tracking is and how it fits into the challenges that were presented here, and or rather into the flows. Before I do that, though, like a quick disclaimer, you may hear it as like server-side is a golden bullet, silver bullet rather, like do this and fixes all of your problem. I encourage you, before I start talking and everything, to think about it as a tool, right? A tool that can fix a bunch of different problems, a tool that has a bunch of different applications. Not all of them are necessarily required by yourself, but however, like I said, I'm going to tie it into the topic of a discussion. So my point here is you should treat it as a tool, and tools can only do so much. Right. That being said, so what is server-side tracking in principle? There's some doodles here, so bear with me. You have your standard client-side situation in front of you where you're reporting things out of your browser directly to whatever destination it might be. Can be your analytics platform, can be Google Ads, can be LinkedIn, what's mentioned today, Meta, and others. They are also not necessarily advertising destinations. Essentially, can be GA4, can be your internal systems and such. Now, this presents a ton of issues in our day and age because Yasin alluded to some of them. There's ad blockers, there's the ITP cookie prevention in Safari and other browsers. So people came up with this. Server-side tracking, essentially, if we want a very a simple definition, it's a proxy that sits in between your browser and the destination. That proxy can solve all of those challenges in a certain kind of way, which I'm going to explain. To be really pedantic, we need to add a single detail to this picture, which would be this. I don't know if you noticed that or not. There's another arrow that appeared here in between server and browser. This is critical to kind of understand. The meaning of this being that your server, which is a proxy that sits in the middle, can still communicate back to the browser, and we're going to utilize that kind of heavily for the purposes of ad blocker bypass and such, right? So again, high level, we introduced a middleman. We introduced a middleware between the destination and your source of signal, which in this case is a browser. So we talked about ad blockers, right? And Yasin said 42%, this says up to 40, which is more or less the same. On average, globally, there's up to 40% of ad blocker usage by an average user. Those numbers, of course, fluctuate depending on your audience, depending on the vertical we're talking about. They depend. Our average on Stape for prevention, or rather bypassing of ad blockers, is roughly 12% these days, which again tells you that it's an average. There's extremes, of course. One example that I like to bring up in these kinds of sessions is we had a customer who is selling hardware, so had a very tech-savvy kind of audience. And when they implemented this whole thing and started bypassing blockers, they figured out they were not collecting up to 70% of their traffic, right? Again, this is extreme, so you should not expect anything like that. This is very particular to the case, but that demonstrates the principle to you. On an empty spot, so-called out of nowhere, you're just losing so much signal, even though those might be those unqualified initial leads, but you may be losing even them, right? What's also, I think, worth mentioning is that a lot of times that blockers are not actually installed by the user for the purposes of preventing tracking. Essentially, what most of us want from an ad blocker is not to see any banners out there, right? The pesky little things. So yeah, this is kind of a interesting detail to me, because people have no clue that they're actually preventing you from, collecting analytics or reporting conversions or anything like that, because that's not an intended use. A bit more about this, right? I'm not going to read all of this, but in principle, so ad blockers get installed on popular browsers, and that can block scripts themselves. So your Google Tag Manager, your analytics, your G Tag, your Google Ads, you name it, your Facebook pixel can just be prevented from being executed in the browser whatsoever. It just was never downloaded, so your advertising destination is fully in the dark, not only about any conversions happening, but also in the dark about any landings happening off of the click IDs of the advertising clicks, right? The next level of how ad blockers can prevent you from being successful, let's say, is even if they let some of the scripts actually load, they will start interfering with the request they send. So my pixel, for instance, have loaded successfully, but it did not manage to send any single request to my destination, which at the end of the day is the same. It's just like stats for nerds. They also do that. Last but not least, and I'll show you an example of that, is they will do script manipulation, where to you it will look like everything is working, but not a single request again is dispatched, not because it was blocked, but because your ad blocker just pretty much overridden the entire JavaScript of the pixel or anything. And I'll show you a funny example of that. So this all speaks to the fact that you're just not collecting things in the first place, even before we go into the pipelines and lead qualifications, right? In front of you are two examples from, I don't remember which browser, doesn't matter. So screen number one, you can see a lot of stuff being blocked. One of them is gtm.js. I'm not sure if that's visible all right, but pretty much it says error blocked by content blocker being an ad blocker. The other example, the second screenshot, is you can see gtm.js is like white, successfully downloaded. But if we look into the code, we'll find a funny message from uBlock origin, pretty much saying we were here. So this GTM on this website, although downloaded, does you nothing, literally nothing. It does not execute. You just downloaded a script successfully. So, and again, remember, 40% on the web roughly use this and without even understanding necessarily what it does. I also want to give an honorary mention to these guys, the AI browsers, the new hot stuff, right? All of them, all these 5, have built-in tracking prevention and ad blocker and everything, which you don't really even configure much. You get a question on onboarding, do you want secure browsing? You say, yes, of course, and now you have ad blocker embedded just into the browser, just baseline, no choices or anything. Not only these guys block your tracking scripts, what could be interesting for people in Europe is they will a lot of time block your consent scripts. So they're removing the sort of even a chance for you to ask a person, are they okay with being tracked or their data being collected? This is a big deal as well, because even if you're the entirety of your tracking infrastructure, let's imagine that it works perfectly, you might never get a chance to ask them for consent, right? Which is a big problem as well. Now, that's ad blockers, right? And that is, like I said, that can be solved by server-side tracking. If I go back, sorry for doing this. If I go back to this arrow, the point is you can serve all of those scripts from your server now. You can download your Google Analytics scripts, your GTM scripts, your any consent scripts as well. You can download them from your own first-party domain, from your own server. Therefore, in most cases, bypassing all of these limitations and blockers. Essentially, you make it so that ad blockers do not recognize those scripts to be tracking scripts, or ad blockers do not recognize tracking requests to actually be tracking requests, and they just fly under the radar successfully. So there you go. With this, you can solve ad blockers, right? Switching back here, there's ITP. It's not a complete timeline, I believe. These are just like the core items on it, but ITP first popped up in 2017, I believe, and started limiting us on third-party cookies, which is why for the last 5 or so years you've been hearing all about first-party, this and that. This is the core. This is the initial reason, I would say. This is how this game of cat and mouse started, where Safari and Apple wider introduces some restrictions, and the industry figures out how to live with that and how to navigate in that world. So aside from ad blockers, there's this component. Even if you are tracking all of your events, all of your lead forms successfully, it's not necessarily that you're tracking them with enough information. Enough information being the attribution data, being the click IDs, the cookies, and such, right? So you can collect an event technically occurring, but that event might not have any attribution data, which would tell your advertising destination, your advertising platform to do their job better, to feed the algorithm, like Yasin said. So another point which server-side tracking addresses, and this is one of the core applications of it, is to bypass all of these Safari restrictions, because we will start setting cookies from the server, from your own first-party domain, and there's also ways to deal with the 7-day limitation that was mentioned here. So on top of it, Safari has ITP is growing, ITP is evolving. There's not only cookies, we now know that private mode, for instance, removes some of the known UTM parameters, and your click IDs are also a victim of this. I have a table in front of me that's definitely already happening with Google Gclit, that's already happening with Microsoft, definitely happens with Facebook. That's the most popular one. Funnily enough, LinkedIn was left under the radar for now, so you guys can enjoy that, but I think it's just a matter of another release or anything like that. Again, this particular situation does not necessarily require server-side tracking to amend, but then again, server-side tracking just makes it that much more easier and accessible. So that's another limitation, but we count it into the Safari ITP pile, and that's our pile number 2. This slide essentially shows you I didn't have a time to prepare a proper graphic, so this just sums up, again, we're setting cookies from the server rather than from the browser. Therefore, we're bypassing all of those limitations that I just mentioned in Safari, right? And you can then expect that whatever conversions you ultimately track will be accompanied by those click IDs or by other cookies that the platform set to make their job easier and to make your outcomes on your campaigns better. The third, right, before I switch to this and start explaining this, the third sort of pillar, let's say, of server-side tracking. So we talked about, we bypass ad blockers, therefore we start receiving more signal in principle. We fix the cookie limitations and the cookie lifetimes, therefore we have more quality signal, right? Even if it's the same quantity, we now have better quality. The third pillar of server-side is, since it is a proxy, like we discussed, you have this middleman, and since this is a server, it becomes this data filter / data enrichment layer. Essentially, what it means is that, first of all, you can redact whatever data before it goes to your destination. Let's say you don't want or not allowed to send something to Facebook, you can go ahead and redact it on the fly, right? You cannot do it with the Facebook pixel, for instance. There's some things that it collects automatically. However, you fully control what goes out on the server because you configure that yourself, and you can remove any of the sensitive data. Maybe that doesn't, your business is not allowed to do that. Maybe your local regulation is preventing you from doing something like that. Speaking along the same lines, since this is like a data filtering layer, let's call it that, the big point is that it can receive signal not just from the browser. You are not limited to it being a proxy in between the browser and analytics, although that's the definition of server-side tracking, which I brought to you. You can do so much more. I always say that server-side GTM, server-side tracking in principle rather, is that's an HTTP engine. That's essentially a big, huge automation engine, which means, speaking to the main topic of today's conversation, you can feed it data from your CRM, right? Your CRM, your offline source of any information, can send signal to your server container, to your server-side tracking solution, rather. Let's not even be that specific. Your server-side tracking solution can do something with that data. It can pull additional data from other sources. It can, I don't know, talk to your inventory system. It can pull some profit margin from other places. What I'm trying to convey here is you should not think about it purely in terms of CRM or anything. You should think about it like anything that has a HTTP interface can be a source and can be a destination. Even the CRM example, it's not one way, right? You can push data back to your CRM system from your tracking. You normally do it from the browser, of course, on like a form submission or anything, but imagine something else happens. You may have two CRMs, God forbid. You may have multiple sources, right? Somebody will use Google Sheets still, and that's happening. And I think we should get a stat, like the 50% stat at the beginning was impressive. I think if we dive into how many people use Google Sheets for their data, that'd be crazy. So I'm saying some other source, replace it with any source you can imagine, and don't think about it as a one-directional kind of situation. It can be bi-directional if you have a case for it, which is why I said it's completely a tool, and the matter is how you apply it. So to our pipeline situation, pretty much we submit a form on the server, on the browser, that goes to our CRM. First of all, that goes to our CRM normally because the form is either provided by CRM or we have some associated scripts. Now, we already talked about how those scripts, unfortunately, can also be blocked. So you can still report back to your CRM from the server, right? If we go through this picture, which is why I'm saying it's bidirectional. But that's the easy part. The interesting part is then, like Essen said, so your lead goes through all of those qualifications. It goes through your business funnel, whatever business logic you have. And at any stage, you can report that progress to your tracking stack. In this case, this is server-side GTM. And now you've enabled that, right? Now you essentially enabled omni-channel. Now you're reporting your offline conversions, your later funnel, what's called bottom funnel, to the advertising platforms. They can now do their job better and optimize for those quality leads rather than from just volumes and such, right? This also means, like I said, because we can talk to multiple sources, you can you get something from CRM that maybe contains a piece of the data. If you have another piece of data relevant to reporting living in the other system, you can go ahead and in the same kind of batch do all that. The CRM sends you a signal saying something happened. You go ahead and pull some information from other source, you combine that all together, and you feed it to your advertising platform. I cannot stress enough, like we are not, Yasin said, people are optimizing for leads. I am not seeing this utilized enough by general public. I feel like a lot of people just get stuck. This is a proxy. I'll maybe protect myself from ad blockers, but you can, like, it's a buzzword, but you can unlock all of those data silos you definitely have. There's definitely a piece of data sitting somewhere in your organization which is not utilized whatsoever. And this makes it possible to use that. Moreover, you do it all in a single stack. You do it all in this single solution where you already are probably doing your tagging, your normal, whatever it is, your normal Facebook pixels and such. And now you can concentrate it, centralize it in a single place and have those pipelines sort of, interact with each other. They can share the data. You can build some custom logic. Which brings me to this point. You already have a gold mine of data, right? You have qualified leads. That's one example. You have offline sales. You have, maybe depending on your business, of course, you have some stuff that happens offline fully, right? There's no online engagement whatsoever. Maybe there's not even a lead form submission. There's just, you have a physical store. You have lifetime values most of the time. You have, for the e-commerce people, you have refunds and returns and maybe partial refunds, something that usually doesn't happen on the website, but it is reflected in your CRM, right? And if I did a purchase for a big amount of money, but then I ultimately refunded it and you haven't told the advertising platform that happened, well, we're now optimizing for a wrong person, right? So much things that you can do with server-side tracking in principle by combining all of this data and ultimately doing what Yasin is suggesting and feeding the ads destinations proper tiers of conversions and deciding what to optimize on. And the last bit from me is to give you some numbers coming directly from Meta, Facebook. So this is fairly, I don't think this is like too fresh, but in principle, the reduction in cost per quality lead up to 15% compared to ads that optimize on volume, right? Again, this is not maybe hundreds of percents, but you have to understand this is average on Meta. So that's a huge, huge data set. Increase in the rate of converting a lead to quality lead, 44% compared to leads optimizing for volume, right? So even the platforms themselves obviously will tell you that this is the way to go, and this way they can deliver that much more for you on your budgets. And yeah, I think I'm done.
Thanks, Dan. I wanted to add one quick point to your previous point that you made around the capabilities that ultimately stay untouched, and I completely agree with that. Sometimes there is a educational and kind of conceptual barrier, but a lot of the things that we find to do complicatedly tough is, for example, on the lead qualification, like things that we can do on the browser to keep the volumes but improve the quality and add some layer of filtering. We're kind of limited to things that happen on the browser at a particular time. If we have a ABM platform, for example, like Sixsense, that give us some firmographic estimated data, we might incorporate it, but this is something that needs to be available and happen at the same time of the submission, and then we have to pre-process it and rely on the browser. Having the server-side component allows us to pull the data from different places and have the timing right so that we can enrich, filter, and then pass that along to the advertising platforms, for example. And ABM
100%.
platforms is one quick example. E-commerce stores, for example, can even pass things that shouldn't display in the browser, like margins. You sell something for $1,000.
I was about to bring
If your
that up.
margin
Yep.
% probably shouldn't put it in the browser, right? People and competitors can see in the server, you're perfectly fine and safe to do so. And a lot of other things, but you're right. This is
Yeah, same
definitely
goes
on
for
the
like
lead.
API keys and such, right? There's some destinations that require authentication. You don't want to expose those secrets and such on the browser. So yeah, many use cases. But then again, I want to encourage people to get like creative with that. This is why I mentioned that whole thing about it being a tool, because you can apply it to so many things, right? The skeleton is there for you. The basics are there. You just need to, it's Lego in a way. I mean, that's a good way to think about it. It's a Lego. You can just like, you use a bunch of blocks and piece it together. And yeah, there's no stressing enough how this is underused, because again, and well, maybe even State is partially guilty of that, but the focus of server-side historically has been, yeah, ad blockers fix the Safari situation, ad blockers and fix the Safari situation. And it can and should be so much more, especially if you are already using it for these initial purposes, right? Then you're just like, you already are paying for the stack, you're already using it, but let's do more. And of course, the main topic of the conversation here makes a ton of sense in this context. So I agree. Do we have some questions maybe?
Amazing. Thank you both, by the way, for the great presentation. It was very interesting. I'm just checking for any questions in the comment section. I would encourage anyone that's watching us to put their questions in the comment section if they have any. But while we're waiting for the audience questions, I have some questions for both of you guys. So we can start with Yasin maybe. If you could only send one post lead signal back to Google or LinkedIn, which one would actually improve performance?
This is quite of a tricky one because it really depends on the scenario and the volumes and the client's business. But often what we do is we try to fit in between the lead and the MQL, something like an ICP lead, we call it, which is something, or rather between the MQL and the SQL, an ICP lead that we define as something that is very strictly defined as what the ICP of the client's users is, additional firmographic data, and make it really specific, but at the same time have enough volume of leads coming through so that we can be more specific and wrangle around it, and then bring the quality through the tighter definition. So I'll probably say that if it has to be just one. But if it is from the standard one, probably MQL covers the wider spectrum when it comes to, if it is properly defined by the client, it covers the wider spectrum, yes.
Thank you.
I'll make a note of that.
Yes, Dan, I also have a question for you. It's more about something I don't think you mentioned during the presentation. So what uplift of measure data do teams usually see after switching to the server-side GTM on Stape? And is there a way to see that?
That's a very complicated. Well, it's easy and complicated at the same time. I'm pulling a classic consultant on you. It depends. So essentially, it's like this. So I mentioned it a little bit, but very true. So the uplift, first and foremost, you have to understand is very, very individual, because it's unclear from just an abstract point of view which of at least the two of the issues you implementing server side may have fixed for you, or did it even require fixing in the first place, right? The only way to kind of gauge that is, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, just go ahead and try and see, like, set it up and wait for some period of time and see what's going on. That being said, an average, like I said, the average number we see up to 12% of event occurrences, this is just occurrences in principle, right, happen, that Stape successfully tracks, happen in an ad blocker environment, which means that up to 12% on average of events would just never be collected, therefore never be distributed to your ads destination. That's not necessarily uplift, but it's speaking towards the goal, right? Second is, I mentioned that crazy example with the hardware store people, again, just to demonstrate that uplifts are very individual. They can be crazy because a set of circumstances came together, and this was a very special situation, right? It might not be that extreme for you. But if I'm like, if you put a gun to my head and I need to tell you an average, I would say 15-ish is a fair average that you can expect. Again, from the combination of the factors, and sort of depending on you having implemented everything correctly. And that would be, yeah, some ad blockers, cookie, and did you guys lose me? Did I just freeze? No, sorry, something weird here. Right, so like I said, so that ish percent will be a combination of maybe some ad blockers and maybe some attribution just based on the cookies. If you throw on top your Omni, your off versions, probably uplift would be even higher. But basic implementation, I have tried server-side tracking, you can expect at least like 10% uplift for sure, in most cases.
I think I lost you for like a second, like 10 seconds, maybe just me. I'm not sure.
Me too, I think you may have. I want to apologize for anyone. Yeah, sorry, it's probably my internet connection.
Could be mine. Not exactly sure.
Yeah. So yeah, and just to finish on that thought, if you go ahead and try this with Stape, we will give you this very handy tool called Stape Analytics, which essentially, if you run your tracking with us, we will give you a good dashboard that shows you specifically that. It shows you the uplifts, as in how many events were collected in an ad blocker environment, how many events were collected in a tracking prevention environment, such as Safari, iOS, all of those other browsers. And there will be some fancy breakdowns by event, by this and that. So you can absolutely gauge, outside of just looking at your ads platforms, that this all made sense and there's some data flowing that wasn't there before.
Great, thank you so much.
Dan's question, I think the 15-20% is a fair amount that we see across a few of the setups that we run. So kind of agree on that.
And that's just so, I mean, it's like, I had somebody told me once, well, we only seen an uplift of like 7%. I'm like, well, 7%, it's huge, right? And it's also right there. You just had to go and pick it up. So I mean, yeah, even if somebody has this kind of unfortunate from server-side tracking perspective, but fortunate from their perspective case where like all of this only gave them an uplift of, I don't know, 3 to 5%, I think it's still worth it. 5% is immense, right? Especially if we talk volumes. So yeah, definitely worth a try in any case.
Yep. Thank you so much, Dan. Checking the comment section, but I don't see any questions from the audience. So maybe we can move on to wrap things up. But I just want to say to our audience that even if some questions pop up after the session, you can just put them in the comments on the event page, and we'll make sure to keep an eye on that and answer if there are any, because I know a lot of people usually watch the recording afterwards. So if any questions appear, just pop them up in the chat in the comment section, and we'll make sure to answer those. The recording of the session will be, of course, available on the LinkedIn event page right after we end this live, and anyone who was not able to attend can go and watch it. We'll also be sharing it on our YouTube channel very soon, so you can also watch it there. If any questions appear, just pop them in the comment section. We'll also be sharing the slides from the session in probably like a LinkedIn post at the end of this week. But yeah, if you found this session useful, guys, feel free to share the link to anyone, any colleague or anyone you know who would find this useful, interesting, and would benefit from this. That's how we grow this community. So yeah, feel free to share it with anyone you know. Again, Yas and Dan, thanks a lot for joining me here today for this session. It was super interesting for me. And thanks for everyone, of course, who joined us online. And yeah, have a great
Thanks for having me.
rest of your day or evening for anyone that's not here.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
See you next time. Cheers. Bye.
See ya.